What's up, Covalence friends? Today we're going to be connecting our first ever Redis Labs database to an Express Node.js backend, and we're going to be using it for a very simple yet very common use case. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. All right, so we're starting off with our Express template, and it's just a basic template using Express and Node.js. And if you want the link to this exact repo, it's in the description below. So I highly recommend you just downloading it, cloning it, and using it as a starting point. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to npm install the Redis package. So you can open up terminal, npm I redis --save. Should only take a second. Awesome. And if we want to check, we can make sure that that was actually added to our dependencies, which it was. They're on version 4.6.6 right now. Let's go ahead and update the name of this as well. I already npm installed the other dependencies, so we're picking up from there. And so the next thing we're going to want to do is we can create a new folder called services, and inside of this folder we're going to create our redis.ts file. And this is going to be what we use to kind of connect and create the client. And so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to import create client from Redis. And there's typings already included, so it knows exactly what this is, and it has everything that you need from a typing standpoint already included. And I actually have credentials in here too that I'm going to just import. I don't feel like dealing with, deleting my keys and everything like that. So just make sure that when you actually sign up, you grab these, and I'll kind of show you exactly how to do that in a second. So actually, let's do that. Let's go ahead and do that now. So let's open up a browser, and we're going to just search Redis Labs, and we get redis.com as the top choice. And so this is basically what we're going to be using. Now there's other Redis Redis suppliers, there's other Redis people who host Redis. These are particularly my favorite because they offer a free database trial, which is very nice. So we're going to go ahead and log in, and you can go ahead and you can create, essentially create a new email here, or I'm going to use Google. So it's going to automatically authenticate me. And you see, it's going to ask you on first time creation, it's going to ask you what service you want to use, AWS, Google, or GCP, or Azure. And I just chose Azure for this instance, but I was just kind of curious to see how well it worked. I've used AWS and Google in the past. They all basically work the exact same, so it really doesn't matter what you choose, but you'll basically, once you choose, you'll be given an option. I recommend using whatever whatever service you're actually hosting your project in. So if you're hosting your project in Azure, choose Azure. If you're hosting yours in GCP, choose GCP. Now, you click into the actual database, or you can go to databases here and click into the actual database that you're given. Now, again, this is a free service, so it's kind of nice. I think you're given up to 30 megabytes. So you got to be smart about what you use it for. But the public endpoint here is basically what we're going to need, as well as the username and password found down here. So by default, the username is default, and the default user password is given here, so you can go ahead and just copy that. But I've included both of those in my credentials file here, and so you're just going to want to copy those either into a credentials file, or you can just copy them straight into this file here. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab those credentials using a require statement. So we're going to just do require creds.json, and then we're going to create our client. So we're going to say const client equals create client, and we're going to create a URL endpoint here, and that's going to be the Redis protocol, and it's going to be using the username. So first you need your username. And again, if you aren't using a credentials file like this, you could use environment variables, or you could just copy them straight into the file itself, as long as you're checking it into a private repo and not posting this anywhere publicly. So after the username, you're going to use the password. So it's going to be username : password, and it's going to be the @ symbol, and then it's going to be the endpoint, right? So I have basically 3 entries in my credentials file. I'm not going to show them to you because I don't feel like deleting the actual database, and I don't want you guys connecting to my database, right? So again, this would be the URL protocol here. This would be the protocol whack or : / username : password at the endpoint. And again, if you look up here, that's going to basically just be your username here, colon, password at the @ symbol, and then the endpoint here. So you're going to put the whole endpoint, including the port at the end, right? So it's going to be colon port. That's going to all be included. So you can just copy that right there and include that inside of your create client. So after we actually have the client created, we can set an error listener. So if we're going to be, given an error of any kind, we can just, for right now, we're just going to console.log, we're going to say Redis error. Oh, we'll do capitals, why not? And error, there we go. And then finally, we want to export a function called connect. And inside of here, we're just going to return client.notconfig yet, client.connect. And then we can export default client. And we'll just use this client in any file that we need to, for mostly just using the getters and the setters. If you wanted to create getter and setter functions as well, you could do that. I'm going to just use the client straight up. But that's your call. So let's go ahead and go into our index.ts at the root of our folder. And this is basically where we're actually, configuring our server and listening, creating our HTTP server and listening on a particular port. And so I am just going to actually come in here and I'm going to change this to be an async function. And after, we have successfully created our HTTP server, I'm going to just put a little try catch block in here. And I'm going to import the connect, but I'll just see if, let's see if IntelliSense can grab it. There we go. So I just imported connect from services/Redis, right? That's that function that we created. That's also, all it's doing is actually connecting to our Redis host. And so we're going to await connect. And after we've actually connected, we're going to console.log Redis connected. And we'll do a little exclamation point, why not? Otherwise, we're going to say error connecting to Redis. And we're going to know that there's an actual issue there, right? All right, awesome. And finally, what we can do now is we can go into and actually use this, right? So let's go into our routers. We're going to go into our user router and we're just going to remove this because it's a useless route. And we'll say /login. And inside of this login function, what we're going to do is we're going to make this asynchronous. And we are going to kind of grab, let's see, we can actually create a body. So we're going to pass up a body. Let's say we're going to pass up something like username and password, right? So we're going to grab body.username, right? And let's see, let's create a variable for attempts. And then this will just kind of be something that we use just for demonstration purposes. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of play out the scenario where we're going to be using Redis to store, if you're logging in and you're entering the wrong username and password, you only want to give the user so many attempts before you basically lock them out, right? And so we want to allow for 5 attempts, and after 5 unsuccessful attempts, you want to basically lock them out. You don't want to be checking your database anymore because it can bog down your server. Somebody can write a script, just basically crash your server because you're going to be constantly trying to check your database, right? And it can just tie up your resources and it's no bueno. So we want to make sure that we have some sort of mechanism for only allowing somebody to try so many login attempts before it basically starts kind of booting them. Right now, obviously, there's ways to do this with your actual proxy servers or something like Cloudflare, right? You can prevent DDoS attacks much more successfully using like IP addresses and so many requests, in a particular amount of time. But this is still a very good mechanism for just ensuring that we, prevent somebody from even just bogging down your server by having, multiple people, sending these particular login requests, right? Because a lot of services, login is going to be a public API route, right? So again, I highly recommend you always safeguard anything that is public as far as API routes go. And so let's go ahead and, we want to import Redis client first. So let's go ahead and import Redis client from, and it's going to be /services/Redis, right? And so we're going to await Redis client.get, and we're going to pass in the username because we're assuming that this username is unique. There's no other, use cases for this particular username. You could make something kind of like if you're going to be using a multi-tiered system inside of your Redis, you could change the key up a little bit, and you could say something like, username, or maybe even just UN and then username, something along those lines, right? Just to kind of segregate out the actual keys. And again, this is a very simplistic use of Redis. It's really just to be getting you started using Redis. And so this can get extremely complicated, and you can use Redis as more or less an entire database if you really want, with all the functions that are included now. So highly recommend, after you get good at this, keep diving into Redis. Maybe I'll make some additional videos about it. Or Redis itself, the company has a ton of resources online that you can check out as well. So let's say if not stored, then we can just say attempts equals number stored. So this is our stored attempts, right? And so now we actually have the number of attempts. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to check how many attempts have happened. So if attempts is greater than 5, we don't want to do anything. We basically want to boot the person, right? And so we're just going to res.status 401.json, and then we can just pass back an object, and we can just say something like too many true, which is just basically saying you've been too many requests. If at that point, if attempts is not greater than 5, then this is basically where you would perform some sort of like db.getUser, where you pass in the username and the body.password, something along these lines, right? And then you could check, if not user, and this is more or less pseudocode, right? We're just pretending that this is happening. This is where you would kind of increment your attempts. So you'd say attempts plus plus, and then you can await Redis client dot. Now there is a set function where we can actually set this, but we actually want to use an additional function on the Redis client called setX. Now, what this allows you to do is it allows you to set a value for a key, but then also provide an expiration date or an expiration time, right? And so basically, if we look at the types here, it's just telling me the issue. Well, okay, let's look at when we actually pull this up. Let's do this one more time. So it's asking for the key, the second. So this is how many seconds after it's going to expire, and the value, right? And so our key is going to be the exact same key that we used when we did the get up here. And then our seconds, let's just say, let's keep it for 60 seconds. And we're going to pass in attempt. So we're going to convert that to a string and pass it in, right? So we're just using template literals to convert that to a string. And then once we actually pass that in, we can say res.status, and we'll say 401.json, and we'll say too many false. And actually, you don't even need to technically await this. You can, just to ensure that it's been set, but realistically, we could just call it because it doesn't really matter. But we'll await it just because I want to show you how fast it is. It's super fast. It doesn't take any time at all. Redis is an extremely fast form of data storage, and so it's just basically the request that's taking any time. And we got to make sure that we return as well, right? And so here too, right? So don't forget the return statements. Otherwise, we're going to get we're going to be setting our headers twice. We're going to get an error and potentially kind of crash or cause problems with our server. So lastly, if none of these happen, which we know that there is no user, right? So user is never going to exist. So we're always going to come into here, but just to kind of finish out the whole pseudocode or the code block, we'll just say, we'll pass in this. So say if there is a user, or if you decide to actually add in this code and have a user, then we'll actually say that, we successfully logged in, right? All right, so that's all we really need for a login function. And we should be able to now kind of move on to the actual front end. So let's kind of pull up our index.html, and we can just kind of change that to say Redis. And for here, all we really need to do is we're going to put a button, and the ID is going to be login. And we're just going to say login. So we're just going to basically click this button and simulate a login effect where obviously nothing's going to really happen. We're just going to click the button 5 times or 6 times and then potentially get some sort of error, right? So let's go ahead and open up our app.ts now. And inside of our app.ts, we'll remove this console.log, and we are going to create a login button. So we can say const login equals HTML button element. It's going to be document.getElement by ID login. And we can say if not login, oops, there we go. Then we can, console.log no button. And we know we made some kind of mistake, right? But otherwise, we're going to add an event listener, and it's just going to be a click listener. And inside of this click listener, we are going to, it's going to be an async click listener. And we're going to add a little try catch block in here. All right, and if it's an error, then, we will console.log error E. Otherwise, we are going to actually make a request in the try block. So let's just say const res equals await. We're going to use fetch, and it's going to be at our API route, which was API/v1/user/login. And we have to actually pass in the method, which was post. All right, we have to create our headers because we want to make sure that the request sets the content type header. So content type is going to be application JSON. And finally, our body, which we are going to just do a little JSON.stringify, and we're going to pass in an object here, and the object is going to just be a static username password. So actually, let's go ahead and add an input box just so that we can actually grab this username. The password, we'll just say is test for now. But the username, let's go ahead and actually put in an input. So let's say we have the login. Let's also put an input, type text, and the ID is going to be username. All right, so we have our input, and it's going to be ugly as all heck, but that's okay. We're not going to do any CSS, but our username is actually going to be this input value. So const input equals HTML input element, document.getElement by ID, and it's going to be what it was username, right? All right, username, and then this is going to be input.value. We can say, we can do in here if not input.value, or let's just say if not input or not input.value, then we're going to alert, please enter your username, return. All right. Otherwise, we are going to pass that up as username, and then we can say const response equals await res.json. We awaited that fetch. So this response, we basically should have access if response.toMany, right? Then we want to alert too many attempts. Please try again, later. Which we know is only going to be 60 seconds if we need to, based off of the expiry here. We could actually do it less if we wanted to. Actually, for demonstration purposes, let's just do 30 seconds just so that we can actually expire it a little bit quicker. All right, and then, else, let's alert invalid credentials, right? All right, so we basically are handling all those cases. Now let's go ahead and run this. So we're going to npm run dev, should start our server on localhost 3000. And Redis connected, that's a good sign. So let's go ahead and we're going to pop open our web page here. So we have our login. Now, if we log in, it says please enter your username. So at least we got that covered. Let's go ahead and we're going to say Matt. All right, login invalid credentials, right? So we can do it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. Okay, so there we go. So again, too many attempts. That's actually because I think we started at 0. So we actually need to check 1 less. But again, we actually have the too many attempts, please try again later, meaning that it is properly storing the Redis values, right? Now, if we want to, we can actually come in here and we can just check. So we can say, if attempts greater than 5, oh, that's because basically when we're coming in here, right, we're starting at 0, right? When realistically we should be, so we're storing 1 initially, right? But after we get through 6, it's the next response that we're actually going. So that's why it was an extra attempt. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, if the attempts are greater than 5, so we really should say 4, because that would mean that we've tried 5 times. So again, we can change that to be 4, and then that would actually make sense, because that means that we've actually tried 5, we've set it, and so now this is the next attempt, and so that would be, our, 6th attempt, I would say. So again, this would be kind of coming through here, attempts equals 0. And then we're setting this. So after 30 seconds, it actually should be good. So I feel like it's been approximately 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and we're going to test it again using the same username. And you can see invalid credentials again. So it's actually setting the expiry 30 seconds from now. So if we were to come through here again, right? And then that was 5, and then too many attempts, right? So please try again later. And keep clicking this, it's going to say, please try again later until 30 seconds are up, right? So again, 30 seconds is a little quick, I wouldn't do that. But if we change this to be Jackson, we have invalid credentials, right? And so it's using a different key at this point, and it should allow us to do 5 attempts, and then too many attempts, please try again later, right? So again, the different keys. Now the expiration should have already passed for Matt. So again, we have a new instance where we can actually try Matt again. But no matter what, we'll get 5 attempts going. And then after 5, bam, we get too many attempts. Please try again later. And that's it. So it's storing those values in Redis, and we have an external database that we can use that's super fast. It doesn't bog down our database, kind of takes off a little bit of load from our own server, and is an effective use for doing something like, login attempts. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope it was simple enough. I feel like Redis is very straightforward and easy to use, and it's very good for easy use cases like this, but can also get extremely complicated, and it's an extremely fast form of data storage. So I'd highly recommend that, exploring your options and figuring out unique ways that you can use it for your application. But I definitely feel like it does cater to certain types of applications better than others. So again, make sure you play around with it, get into some of the more advanced functions, and see if you can actually store some of your data more effectively using Redis rather than just something like a SQL database. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Maybe I'll do a little bit more of an advanced video in the future. And check out our merch store in the link below, and make sure you subscribe, because we're always creating new content and we love seeing you guys. So until then, get out of here.